Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the History of Fan Anime. I'm your host, William Chow, and in today's episode, I'm going to cover a little bit about the tech level, or the internet as we know it. Back in the time when we basically were just starting, the anime and getting interested in anime, and kind of try to give you a picture of what it's like and what sort of sort of things that we'd have to encounter in order to get our anime. Because one of the misconceptions and one of the sort of the beliefs is that things were done a certain way because you had access to the internet, or quote the internet. But the problem is, you got to think, we were doing the things like subtitles or trying to find and get anime before an era, before even the internet as you know it existed. So the notion that for example, I'm picking out things like Anime V magazines and that kind of stuff, and we've got animes and that kind of stuff dating back as far as let's say 1989, for example. The Macross movie and that kind of stuff all came out in the late 80s there. And even we began doing fan subs and that kind of stuff. Back in the 1990s. We didn't even start until 1991. Okay, so what kind of environment, what kind of internet could we actually have at that time? Well, first of all, I'm sure most of you have got modern devices like this, with Windows 10 or whatever in them, and with that. But imagine if you didn't have one of these things. Okay, sure, we had laptops, but they didn't have Windows in them. We're talking about an era before Windows 95. So what kind of internet experience could you have if you didn't even have Windows, and not even Windows 95? Okay, right? You had people that think, oh well, you can browse and look at things all the time on your iPads or on your cell phones and that kind of stuff. Well, we didn't have these portable devices. We didn't even have Palm Pilots at that time. And even in that matter, the iOS that we even had in our Macs, right? We were still starting with like Mac SEs, okay? Macintosh, Quadras and things like that. I mean, my first subtype computer wasn't even into a Centrus or a Power Mac at that time, and that those things have OS 7, so never mind OS X. Okay, so again, what kind of internet experience do you think you could have with one of those? Okay, again, the internet is not as you would know it today. I mean, for example, Google didn't come into existence until 2004. So can you imagine what kind of environment you had without actually being able to use Google as your search engine? I mean, sure, there's like Yahoo or something, but again, what would you be searching? Like if you try to type in anime, what things could come up? Well, obviously, there wasn't a lot of commercial companies using the internet at this time as a marketing tool, or as to have personal websites where you can sell and do commerce on, because again, that didn't occur for the longest time. Heck, even Amazon, okay, didn't even launch a public website to do online orders and that kind of stuff until 1995. Okay, so you had to even wait until Windows 95 came out before Amazon was even available online for you to basically get things. And even the huge court and lawsuit happened about the usage of one-click checkout type of things. That went on until 1997. So you got to think, even Amazon wasn't the way it is today. So you couldn't go to Amazon to go and get the same sort of things that you now do now. It was more books and that kind of stuff, right? Of course, that was available on Amazon at that time. So even then, you still couldn't really get a lot of anime type items off of Amazon, because again, This is before even that was even introduced or launched on the quote internet. Okay, so what else could you maybe find or whatever? Well, that was sort of also the launch of another era of the e-commerce stuff where eBay started, but back in 1995. Okay, but again, so where and what could you do and get your anime from before Windows 95 came out? Again, this is sort of an environment where you got a computer that doesn't have Windows. So what kind of internet browsing kind of thing could you really do? And the answer to that is, well, you didn't really have, quote, that same kind of, internet, Netscape navigator or whatever to go and look up stuff on the internet like you do today. Okay? A lot of the information came off of things like news groups. Okay? So basically, a text version of, say, something like 4chan or 2chan or something like that, or if you follow things like Reddit or things like that, you'd be a lot of that kind of stuff. Okay, they were being pumped through, basically major government hubs and universities. Okay, that's why a lot of the places that had this news net or news group type of thing would be organizations that basically ended in .edu. Okay, so it'd be like Rutgers.edu or U Berkeley, for example, .edu, or University of Berkeley.edu. Okay, it'd also be a lot of government installations. Okay, would also have this Usenet thing, basically fed to it and then basically distributed out of that. And those would be all things like your NASA.gov, gov, things like that. Okay, and those would be big distribution or hubs for information. Okay, and then you can go onto those and read messages, ask questions, and that kind of stuff, and then hopefully other users that are using that same news group would be able to give you some answers or point you in the right direction or whatever. But again, it isn't some sort of say searchable web engine that you could use to find all the information about anime. Okay, again, most popular news groups at this particular time was something like rec.arts.anime, and then of course they broke that into different categories and whatnot for that. So again, it was pretty slow in terms of getting information and that kind of stuff. Okay, so you also think, okay, so we're on an era, pre Windows 95. Okay, what kind of internet service could you possibly have? I mean, obviously we're not going to have broadband, cable vision type of connection internet services. Obviously we don't, you're not going to have fiber optic connections and that kind of stuff at this time. So that isn't going to be what people have in their homes. No, most people are going to have is they're going to probably have a dial-up. Okay, and you're going to have dial up to one of your local telephone companies or private providers, and then they will hook you up through into the internet. Okay, that you can then use to, for example, view news groups or whatever that you had, or maybe somebody had set up a GeoCities page or something, and then you can get some go to someone's GeoCities page or Yahoo page and get information from that way. Okay, it's hard to say, so information was it was sparse, and what information the people came out with, it may not be actually commercial sites or anything like that. A lot of it is private, people just like you and me putting up, for example, GeoCities pages, or putting information on Arts Anime, for example, about different things of anime. And again, I got a lot of orders and requests for fan subs and that kind of stuff over the internet. Again, just usage of things like just email, using the news groups to spread the information that these fan subs and that kind of stuff are available. Okay, and that's how basically we started communicating. It's just basically through emails and that kind of stuff. Even though as slow as they are, and retrieving information and that kind of stuff is as slow as they are. But again, a lot of information went through what they referred as news groups. Okay, for anime. Okay. The other thing that I want to also make a note of and make a mention of is that a lot of people seem to have this, misconception about, the global commerce and how we got information. See, we come at a time where information didn't flow really quickly between overseas, from one country to another country, from one end of the world to the other end of the world, or from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, for example, right? So being here in Vancouver, I really wouldn't know what happens in, say, for example, in Hong Kong or in Japan, whether it's local news or whatever, some happenings, or someone set the Guinness Book of World Records for a feat or something like that. I wouldn't know about it until the next Guinness Book of World Records book came out, or I wouldn't know that it's the springtime festival in Japan, or it's the National Kangaroo Day in Australia or something like that. Like, again, these things I would not know, and would not be brought to my attention, because they're not, quote, newsworthy. If I pick up a newspaper, I'd pick up or watch the evening news or something. If it didn't create some sort of news feature, and they sent a reporter over there or something to basically relay the information back to me, or to to the TV station or to the newspaper. Again, you would never know such events and that such things has occurred. Okay, so again, things like when we get for example, TV feed or whatever from let's say Australia or from Japan, it's very, very irregular. It's unusual. Okay, because there isn't a subscription service where it was very hard to get a subscription for that matter, to get like a satellite feed or a direct feed of something from Japan, here in Vancouver. That's just that's something that was very uncommon, probably very, very expensive, and and not very many people would have done that kind of thing. So again, I wouldn't know if certain things and whatever would happen in Japan, unless of course it made like the evening news. Okay. So one of the things that of course started happening or started occurring is that people, bookstores and whatnot, would start basically getting having somebody in Japan. Okay, so having a physical person in Japan basically buy, let's say, newspapers, or record video cassettes of whatever was being played on TV, and whatnot. They would take that information, put it into a box, and then basically mail it, or put it in a container and have it shipped over to Vancouver here. And then at that time, then when people opened up the box and then say, okay, here is a month's worth of magazines and newspapers and that kind of stuff from Japan. So then when you pick them up, you can open them up and say, oh, okay, now I know that the next Dirty Pair movie's coming out, or they're releasing the record for SPT Lazenar, or they got this new series called Super Dimensional Orgus coming out, and they show pictures of it. So that's that would be the only way you would know, is because over here, if you look at a TV Guide magazine or People's magazine and that kind of stuff, you would never know, or wouldn't know any of this kind of information, any sort of titles or that kind of stuff, because again, it wouldn't make the news over here. You would have to, as I said, literally have somebody else over there, maybe a relative, a friend, whatever, or the local owner of a, say a Japanese grocery store or something, and they would be all there, sitting there recording all the basically the stuff that's on TV, all the programming that's on TV. They'd be maybe grabbing magazines off of a shelf in Japan, throwing them into a box, or a whole bunch of other goodies and that kind of stuff, or stock, for example, if it's a Japanese store, maybe they're stocking up on candies and that kind of stuff. Throw them all into a box, ship them all over, and then do that every month. And then then that's how we would know what kind of anime is coming out in Japan. That's what we could see these recordings of the TV programming that they have in Japan, and that's what that's how we would know that this kind of information comes out. Okay, now the other thing that sort of occurs is that this not only occurs just for, if, for example, if you're going to try to get anime from Japan, you can ship stuff from Japan. But of course, this can also happen in other countries too. Okay, because anime is being filtered out and gone to many different parts of the world. Say for example, in France, for example, they got Captain Harlock as the Albertira. Okay. Maybe, because you would find it easier, I could maybe, get a pen pal or something, or maybe some communication over the internet using Rectart's anime, that this person in France has a copy of, let's say, the French version of Captain Harlock available. And so if I wanted to say, hey, can you make me a copy of a bunch of these things of Albator, first 10 episodes or whatever, and then I'll send you some fan sub versions of Orange Road or something, and make an exchange, and then there we go. So now I can get some episodes of Albator, and he can get some English fan subs of the new Orange Roads. And a lot of times, sometimes a lot of trade transactions like that happen at this time. And so it's not just Japan is the only place that you can get this kind of information. Now here's the question. Here's the trick. Not everyone will know, and it's not very easy to find out what is available, not only in Japan, of course, but like elsewhere around the world. Because as I said, sure, Captain Hawk did come out in Japan, but of course, it got licensed and put out into other countries, so that in other languages. Saint Seiya is another very popular one. Because again, you go to Japan and look at what they have in the magazine. They promote a lot of this series called Saint Seiya. But of course, in other parts of the world, Argentina, Mexico, and that kind of stuff, they may know it as the Zodiac War, things like that, right? And some of them series, they got translated in different languages. And again, people can get copies of this kind of thing and trade tapes of this kind of stuff if they once they know that this stuff is available. Again, I'm not going to get into the whole the issue of whether it's NTSC or PAL or whether it's 50 hertz or 60 hertz. That's another technological issue that early tape trading had. But again, we came again for an era where there is this thing. It's called the internet. Okay, let's get straight. There is something called the internet. Okay, but it is nothing like the internet as you know it today. Okay, not as fast, not as much information as you would think. In terms of search engine and that kind of stuff, and the way that you used it was not the same. The equipment that you had to use it. For example, you don't have something that has, a nice small portable browser like these iPads, or nice small portable laptops with Windows 10 or whatever in them. You don't have these kind of things. Okay, you have big bulky computers, or you have to use the computers at a an authorized school or government resource or that kind of stuff, or PCs using dial-up or that kind of stuff. It's just a different type of experience, and all to basically make it harder to get the anime and the things that you wanted to get. Okay, and it's difficult but not impossible. Okay, it just requires a lot more shall we say personal resource, whether it's your time, whether it's your money, whether or not it's the extra little effort that it requires to do the research, the packing, the recording, the negotiations and that kind of stuff. All this extra stuff that you had to do in order to get your anime, even to get it in your possession so that you could actually watch it. Okay, it's no one click and then it starts streaming and you can see it in color, you can hear the dialogue, you can see the translations, that kind of stuff. It's not like that. Okay. There was a lot of legwork that had to be done in order to get there. Okay, so in summary, if you could just remove all this, these technological advances that we had, yes, you could just say that the anime fan pre Windows 95 had it pretty rough. Okay, not that we didn't have any anime, but we still had to really kind of yeah, work hard together to get some of the titles that we had to work with. Again, in a future episode, I'm going to actually get into some of the more details about some of the actual letter writing and some examples of that kind of stuff. Some of the things that we actually fan subbed and some examples of how we would have had to trade or duplicate video cassettes and exchange them, for example. Show you what that man entail. I'm also going to get into now that we're on the topic of tech, get into the technology behind doing things that we take for granted for now. For example, things like making AMVs, and of course, I'm also going to pull up the computer that I used to do the original fan subs with. We used to make things like Orange Road, Maison Kaku, Pilot Labor, Sailor Moon, and all that kind of stuff. Pull that computer out and show you what we had to work with. And you can see, yeah, I mean, by today's standards you'll be surprised how little processing power these things have, how little memory, how little hard drive space, for example, these things have by comparison to these modern computers that you use nowadays, and these modern even pieces of tech like the iPhone or the iPad even. By comparison to these devices. But this is what we had to work with, and this is what we made our subtitles with. And so, hopefully they'll give you a more deeper appreciation for how hard it was to get anime and to make fan sub anime available to people. Okay, so. What you want to do right now is hit subscribe, hit like, because that will give you the information when we put out the next episodes, especially regarding tech and how anime fan subbing and that kind of stuff was done pre Windows 95 era, okay, and how basically anime worked, how the anime scene worked pre Windows 95 and in this sort of really early era of the internet, okay. So, until next time, see you again.